The Harlem Renaissance. Black people wanted to get their identity back after slavery because they were treated so inhumanely. They had to reclaim their identity as human beings because they had no freedom or human rights, and the only way that they could do that was by expressing themselves through their art. This was one thing that had not been taken from them. A number of factors made the Harlem Renaissance possible. The Harlem Renaissance started at the end of World War I in around 1919. At this time, the munitions industry had created lots of new work, which meant that black ex-slaves moved to the northern states to get the jobs. Black soldiers were returning home at this time. They had been sent to fight in the American military and had been exposed to what was going on in the world. At the same time, Philip A. Payton, black real estate agent, convinced white landlords to rent their apartments to black tenants because there were not enough white tenants. As a result, the white people who were there moved out of Harlem and property prices went down. This encouraged even more black people to move in. Not only African Americans, but people who had come from the Caribbean too. 200,000 black people lived in Harlem, the biggest concentration of black people anywhere on earth. This was the starting point. The Harlem Renaissance was a cultural movement that lasted until the mid-1930s. At the time, it was known as the New Negro Movement. Also around this time, a Jamaican man called Marcus Garvey was gathering big crowds in New York. He was talking about Pan-Africanism, bringing Africans from all over the world together, and he was criticising colonialism and imperialism, and what had been done to Africans in North and South America and the Caribbean. While the Harlem Renaissance encouraged black people to find their identity, partly through rediscovering their past, Marcus Garvey took a position some people thought was extreme by encouraging African Americans to take pride in their heritage by participating in his organizations and the black movement. Harlem was throbbing, bubbling, and exciting. It had been transformed from a white neighborhood into a black metropolis and a new center of black culture in the world. Said taking off his sombrero, let's meet for a sweet siesta. I was a son when we first came close. Hubert Harrison was a very important person in the Harlem Renaissance. He created an organization called the Liberty League and a newspaper which was the first newspaper of the New Negro Movement. That yearning to lose Perdido. Another important person was Langston Hughes. In 1926, he spoke for most writers and artists when he wrote in his essays, The New Negro Movement and the Racial Mountain, that black artists intend to express themselves freely, no matter what anyone else thought. Billie Holiday was an example of the type of success that the Harlem Renaissance provided for black artists. She was one of the first black women to sing in a white orchestra, an impressive accomplishment at the time. While chanting a dance fiesta, Billie came from a poor background. She was destitute, in fact. Her mother Sadie was a teenager when she had her. Her and her mother went to court because Billie started skipping school. Later she was sent to the House of Good Shepherd, which was a school for troubled African American girls. She was only 9 years old at the time, and one of the youngest girls there. At 18, Billie was discovered by a producer named John Hammond while she was performing in a Harlem jazz club. Hammond got Billie recording work with an upcoming clarinetist and bandleader, Benny Goodman. With Goodman, she sang her first commercial release, Your Mother's Son-in-Law, and in 1934, top 10 hit Riffin' the Scotch. This was the success of the Harlem Renaissance. He glanced as our dancer bolero said, taking off his sombrero. The work of W.E.B. Du Bois was important to the Harlem Renaissance. Several years earlier in 1903, he wrote a book called The Souls of Black Folk. The book talked about black people having democratic rights. and literacy and education for African Americans. He was calling for an end to lynchings and mob violence, and he was saying that a country fighting for democracy around the world should start at home and give black people the same rights as other Americans. This movement was about black artists and performers using their creativity, art, and culture to reclaim and celebrate their identity. Music was very important at the time. Important types of music were the blues, ragtime, and jazz. Some important musicians came to prominence during this time, like Billie Holiday. Other examples are Bessie Smith, Duke Ellington, Josephine Baker, Paul Robeson, Count Basie, Louis Armstrong, Sarah Vaughan, Fats Waller, Ella Fitzgerald, McKinney's Cotton Pickers. There were also poets and novelists like Langston Hughes, Gwendolyn B. Bennett, Claude McKay, James Weldon Johnson, County Cullen, Georgia Douglas Johnson, Willie the Lion Smith. Apart from W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey, another important intellectual was Booker T. Washington. Booker T. was the first head of Tuskegee Institute, a black university. He worked well with white people, but secretly funded and supported black organizations fighting against segregation and for the rights of black people. This movement showed how art can change the way people think. This movement helped African Americans have a bigger place in the artistic and cultural life of America and set a pattern of change for future generations. Much of what the African Americans have achieved in the last 50 years is a direct result of benefits and gains made by people in the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance came to an end because of the Great Depression. Black people, like white people, had to find ways of surviving when there were fewer jobs and there was less money around. While chancing a dance fiesta,